Okay, this is Don Wedding. We are in Predict 498, and this is the winter quarter of 2018. And this is the final presentation for team number 5, which would be Spacely Sprockets. Okay, Spacely, let's take it away.
Okay, well, hi Don. I'm Sally Payne, and I'm here with our team of data scientists from Forecast Consulting to show you the results of our project for Spacely Space Sprockets. Our goal is to help you stay ahead of your rival, Cogswell Cogs. With Forecast Consulting, we will modernize the forecasting process with new modeling tools and methods to improve the effectiveness and the efficiency, resulting in increased profitability. So basically, better forecasting plus better tools equals more profit. And first, let me introduce the team of data scientists. We have Susan Chauhan. She's our industry expert and Tableau guru. We have Priya Menon. She's our exploratory data analyst and SAS whiz. We have Mark Heipel. He's the software engineer for the custom forecasting system, which we call Rudy. And then I'm Sally Payne. I worked with the Microsoft tools in the app development. And now Susan is going to talk about the forecast process.
Hi, Don. So to start off, we had to think about the current forecast process at Spacely Sprockets so that we could understand what they're doing so we could find ways to improve it. The first step at Spacely Sprockets is to remove promotions from the history. So the shipment history of the manufacturer, their demand planners are going into that history and they're taking out what they believe to be promotions. Well, this may sound easy to do. It's actually quite difficult because the forecast is done at a very granular level. It has to be down at the warehouse level, at the product level, at the customer level. So they're going through and they're trying to figure out what part of the shipments are all the way down at that level, part of a promotion. And the other piece of that is there's no way to really know. It's really a judgment call. It's kind of a best guess at what they're doing. Then they're taking that and they're putting it through the SAP APO statistical forecasting system. So they're taking the base history that they've cleansed out these promotions and they're projecting that into the next 12 months. Once they do that, they go into the sales and operations planning meeting with the cross-functional partners from sales and marketing and finance and such, and they're then adding back in business insights. So while this sounds like a very smart process, especially if you have done promotions in the past that you will not do in the future, we found that a lot of the time it was more a scenario like we're seeing here where there's been some sort of promotion the last couple of years and they're projecting to do something very similar again in the future. So they're doing a lot of work to take these promotions out and then pretty much add the same ones back in. So in a way, we've got people digging a hole and then somebody else filling in the same hole. And so there's a lot of activity, a lot of job security in that busyness, but we're not sure that there's a lot of effectiveness or efficiency in that. Part of the concern is that they're making assumptions taking the promotions out, and then they're making assumptions putting them back in. And sometimes when they add them back in, the total doesn't seem right. So we've got people who are then trying to kind of create the total forecast, not necessarily add promotions back in. So it's not necessarily the most efficient or effective or even the best way to do it. In fact, a lot of times there's bias getting built in as well. For instance, the marketers in the S&OP process, they are given spending based on their forecast. So if they plan on having a big year for their product because of their initiatives, they'll get a lot more spending investment to go into their business. So it's always in their best interest to have the forecast maybe a little higher than it should be. So we wanted, whoops. Hold on. Okay, somehow we lost a slide. So give me 1 second.
Must be a Cogswell Cogs slide.
Yeah. There, sorry about that. Okay, I found it. Good thing it was still in there. So we wanted to understand the forecast process performance. So this process of taking the the promotions out and then adding them back in, is it actually doing any good? We've heard people from Spacely Sprocket saying they think that, even the forecast is so bad that just using last year's shipment information would be better. So we went through and we analyzed that. And this is an example of one product at one warehouse. And we've gone through and taken the forecast, which is this blue line. And then we've calculated, based on that forecast, what actually happened over the last 6 months and all the inventory settings, what type of inventory situation Spacely Sprockets would be in during this time period. The ideal is this green area in the background. So as you look here, we have this red line, which is the forecast error. As the forecast error is above 0, that means that the sales are above the forecast. And as it goes below 0, that means that the sales are below the forecast. So as you go down below and stay below this line for a while, you'll see that this inventory level starts to climb. And when it climbs above that green area, that means there's excess inventory in the system. So this is inventory that was not planned for, and it's tying up capital, it's tying up money that could be reinvested back in the business. So this is a cost of having poor forecast accuracy. Then as the forecast error climbs up above 0, you can see that the inventory level then will start to drop, and it can go all the way below 0. And that basically means you have no product. So when the customer orders come in, there's nothing there to send. There's no sprockets to send out the door. And that, of course, is going to be a cost to your profit. So we're trying to figure out how to best create a forecast that will balance your inventory and your service level. So looking at the current situation, we took all of the products at the warehouses and we did this analysis and we looked at it for the last 6 months. And then we took the amount of excess inventory and turned that into the cost of holding that inventory. And we looked at the loss of sales profit. And we found for the current forecast that there was a $5.5 million average excess inventory and $11.1 million lost sales profit for a total of $16.6 million in inventory cost. Now, that sounds like a big number, but we wanted to do something to compare. So knowing that people had said, well, just using last year could be better, we went ahead and tried the naive forecast in the same way of analysis. So we took it and we looked at the average excess inventory, and that was $8.1 million if you use the naive, so just same period last year, same month, move it as the forecast to the future. And that we saw a lost sales profit of $27.1 million. So if you use the naive forecast, it would be a total inventory cost of $35.2 million. So using the current forecast actually is an improvement of $18.6 million versus the naive. So we're calling that the forecast value add. So now Priya is going to talk about some of the different technologies that we thought about.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, all. So we considered 4 different time series forecasting software tools, and they were Microsoft Azure, Forecast X, R, and SAS Forecasting Studio. We built a system evaluation criterion that included modeling, system capabilities, and price comparison. After examining and grading each criterion, we chose R as our forecasting tool, as R outperformed other technologies based on the fact that R has exploratory data feature, R produced more accurate forecast, R has large suite of modeling methods, packages available, R has batch mode capabilities, and that R is the least expensive software among these. So now Mark is going to talk about our modeling system.
Hi, Don. I will now describe Rudy, our tool that was used to train models and build forecasts. It was written entirely in R. It uses the free single computer version, and it uses standard freely available modeling packages. Next slide.
So wait, can I interrupt with a question? When you say all of the packages inside of Rudy are in CRAN, is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, great. So you don't have to buy anything.
Don't have to buy anything. Everything's freely available.
Okay.
The goal of Rudy was to design the system to be as automated as possible. Rudy turns data into forecasts with minimal intervention by the analyst. The combination of products and clusters is a data set with approximately 190 time series. Rudy fits a suite of dozens of models to each individual time series. Then the best models of the suite are selected and used to generate the forecasts. Building this number of models is time-consuming and cumbersome, so Rudy accomplishes this automatically in a batch process. Next slide. This slide shows Rudy's processing steps. First, the data is cleaned. This step primarily identifies products that have too little data to train models automatically. And we found only one product out of 141 that required manual forecasting. Next, Rudy trains the models. In this step, Rudy builds a list of models that will be trained and validated for each product. The list includes a combination of no, quarterly, and yearly seasonal periods, and it includes approximately 24 different modeling techniques. The combination of seasonal periods and modeling techniques adds up to approximately 9,000 models per time series. After training models, Rudy next chooses the best model. Rudy does this by choosing the best 3 models based on the error of out-of-sample forecasts. Finally, Rudy creates 6-month future forecasts for each product. The forecasts are created in a format suitable for use in the Tableau dashboards. Next slide. We found that processing requirements to train the models is very intense. Fitting and validating a large number of models and seasonal periods for each product required approximately 1.7 million models. To solve this, we created a distributed processing system. This cut the processing time from approximately 20 hours down to about 6.5 hours. We also designed the system to be fault tolerant so that a failure in any single worker machine does not stop the entire process. This allows the company to run models overnight so that analysts can have results in the morning. The system is scalable. As demands increase, more worker machines can be added to the system. And then unfortunately, we killed one of our worker machines during testing. Next, Susan will demonstrate the Tableau dashboards.
Okay, I'm going to just make sure each one of these is refreshing real quick before I get going again, so we don't have to wait and watch them spin. Okay, so the first dashboard I'm going to show you out of our 3 has our product selection dashboard. This is for the demand planners. So once Rudy takes these full history, not the promotions removed, the full history, it then creates these forecasts and we can display them in this dashboard in Tableau. The dashboard contains the 3 different options that Rudy created. So it doesn't just give you one option, it gives you 3 different options to choose from. It shows those with the history, the forecast in purple, and the confidence intervals around that forecast. It also gives you some numbers. So the mean absolute percent error is the way that Rudy selects the best model. So you'll see that the top one is always going to be green in that column. And then we also have a secondary metric to help the demand model, and that's the holdout bias for that same 6-month period. Because as I showed you before, when we're looking at inventory, overselling in one direction or underselling in the other direction can have impacts on your financials. So we want to make sure that that's also a consideration. Now, this model, this product I pulled up, product number 16, the best model that was chosen by Rudy is up here on the top, and you can see it gave a trended model. It shows which model it is here. It's a trended one with no seasonality. And if you look closely, you'll see that this particular model is actually going to 0 in 6 months. So our demand planner would look at that, see that, and say, well, I don't know that this is actually going away. Perhaps we still have distribution and retailers. If they're still carrying the product, it's very likely you will be selling the product still in 6 months. So this is probably not the best model for the demand planner to choose. But that's good because they can look at it, see what's going on, not just trust the numbers, and then choose one that's more appropriate. So they would probably go ahead and choose the second model, which does have seasonality and does seem to have more than 6 months of forecast left. That way you don't have these problems with your inventory going down to 0, with your capacity planning, all those other things that would be impacted if somebody had accidentally chosen a model going to 0.
Can I interrupt with a quick question here? So what is the scale of the number of products that you guys would realistically, with this approach, have in a store? I mean, obviously, this isn't going to work for Walmart with, 50,000 products, because you wouldn't be able to go through manually and look at every one. What do you think this could handle? Or do you think it could handle Walmart?
Well, this is for the manufacturer. So if you're a manufacturer and you're selling your products to more than just Walmart, my experience is you would probably have about 150 products per person, so they could potentially go through and look at each one. But that's not ideal. Ideally, we would then have an exception-based process to identify where there are potential issues like this. So that would be maybe another dashboard in the future that would look and say, this one's going to 0, let's not automatically accept that, let's take a look at those. So instead of looking at 150, you could choose to find the few that have problems.
So your approach would be, so this could conceivably scale up at the Walmart or Amazon level with the right infrastructure in place.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, it could be that the items are grouped. It could be that they're all in here, but you only look at the list of products that have problems. So I have another one I wanted to show, product number 28, to give another example of how this could be used. Now this is a seasonal product. You can see each of the 3 models chosen have the seasonality at 12 periods. And you can see in the history that that's true. You can see where there's peaks that tend to happen year over year and valleys. So, July tends to be a fairly big month every year. And I think probably, December tends to be a low month every year. So you can see by looking at it that, yes, this is a 12-period seasonal, plus all 3 models chose it. What I thought was really interesting about this particular modeling exercise is that the error was pretty much the same on all 3 of these models. So choosing the top one versus the second versus the third as far as accuracy isn't really much of a difference. So in this particular case, looking and seeing that the third model has a much better bias, that would probably be a trigger for the demand planner that even though they look about the same, they have the same accuracy, they probably want to try the third one where they would have a less chance of having too much inventory or too little. Another product that was interesting is product 34. And this one's interesting because in the history, you can see there's a very large anomaly. There's an outlier that went quite large. And the first model is a naive, and it chose to replicate that, and the other 2 did not. So this is another chance for that demand planner who understands what's going on, what's happened in the past, to identify, should I repeat this? Is it going to be something that happens year over year, or do I take it out? They have these 2 choices, and they can choose the appropriate one. And then one last one in this dashboard, product 55. And this one's very interesting because it really demonstrates another reason why you want to have the numbers and not just the view of the history and the forecast. This forecast looks like it has a lot of seasonality to somebody who's just looking for patterns and data. And we all, as people, try to find patterns and data. But if you start to look closer, the peaks are not at the same time each year. July, April, October, they're just not exactly the same timing. And that's why each of these 3 models have agreed that this is not a 12-period seasonal. It's given it a either non-seasonal or a 3-period seasonality. But people would probably want to try to make it into it. And that would just be bad news. If you were to try to forecast too high for a period and it actually came in low, that could cause a lot more problems than putting a nice straight line in there and then being either having to flex up or flex down. So I thought that was another interesting example of why it's good to have both the numbers for the metrics as well as the history so you can visually see what's going on.
Can I ask another quick question? So Rudy's making all these predictions, and then you're here displaying them. How does Rudy feed his predictions into the dashboard, or is it does he read it to a file and you consume the file? How does that work?
Correct. It's put into a CSV file that can be then uploaded into Tableau.
Okay.
So the second dashboard we have is one that's really designed for this meeting. This one is to show you how the Rudy statistical project forecast is comparing to the original Spacely Sprockets forecast. So this is that financial forecast value add I explained earlier. We had found that Spacely Sprockets was $18.6 million. Well, Rudy is $19.7 million value add. So it's that much of an improvement over the naive forecast. And the reason that's really significant is that Rudy is just taking history and repeating the patterns. It's not adding any business information. So the fact that it's doing better job than the original Spacely Sprockets forecast just kind of proves out that that process that's being used today, where you take out the promotions forecast and then add back in, is not really having the intended effect. It's not doing the accuracy as well as somebody would like. And to take a kind of another look at that, I wanted to show in this group. So these are the clusters that the Spacely Sprockets is using, and then these are the products. So looking at this product 32, you can see that the original forecast was a forecast value of $200,000, and we've doubled that at $400,000 using Rudy. And if I go back to the other dashboard, we can take a look at this product 32 and see what's going on. So as you can see, this particular one shows that we have a seasonality of 12, and it's showing up very clearly. And just looking at it, it is a very strong seasonality. You have this dip, this big one every December. You have these peaks that happen every year in April and July. So this just demonstrates how Rudy can take that pattern with all the data still in it and project it out and get much better results with only 4.6% error versus the team who's trying to take it out and add it back in. Now I'm going to go on to our third and final dashboard. Now that dashboard I showed you was, as I said, this one here is really about today because it's only comparing the Rudy forecast to the original forecast. Once you adopt Rudy as your statistical forecasting system, then there's no need anymore to look at an original. Rudy will be the only forecast. But there's still some benefit that can be had through these types of dashboards because Rudy will be now the starting point, and then there will still be a sales and operations planning process that will try to improve that forecast from Rudy. And so it's really valuable to have these total forecasts that you can compare. The current Spacely Sprockets situation has removed the data to have a base, statistically forecast the base, but there's no way to tell if that statistical forecast on the base is right because there is no such thing as a real base. It's just an assumption. Somebody's chopping the total number in two pieces and thinks it's right. But in this new system, Rudy is looking at the holistic forecast, and you can compare that to what actually happened. And then we're taking and we're incrementally changing it with the S&OP insights, and then you can check that against the total. So it becomes much more traceable, this new process, instead of kind of guessing and hoping that all the pieces are working together correctly. You can start to investigate and find out what is working and what is not working. Now, this is set up in a way that's very much the way the business talks in the sales and operations planning meetings. So it's much more the way marketing and sales looks at the portfolio. It has the categories on the first page, these hierarchy level 1. And as you can see, in most cases, Rudy did better, except for this one category, 4,000. And on the second page, when we get there, you'll see the product families, so the more detailed. And it's going to take a little bit because we're doing this on Tableau public right now and it has a lot of calculations, but in the future when it's on the Tableau server at the company, it will be much faster. Now, here we go. We have the families. There are 16 families in this product set that we were using, and all of them except for 11,300 show some sort of forecast value add. They're all above 0, but 11,300 is showing negative. So I'm going to click on that family and we'll see that there are 4 products in that family, and all 4 of them, the statistical forecast was not adding value, but it did better than the sales and operations planning forecast. Now, this is a great signal for the demand planners that there might be something wrong with the model they're choosing, or potentially that this is a product that could not be, or product grouping that cannot be statistically forecasted right now for probably in many reasons. Maybe it's too new, doesn't have enough data. Maybe there's a lot of new things going on with the competition or other things that would require more of a manual approach to this product line. But all the other ones, the statistical forecast is doing better. So we added another feature to help understand where the statistical forecast is doing better and where the sales and operations planning is doing better, and that's this filter here. So you can choose to find all the places where the S&OP process is adding value. And when we do that, we see that there are 4 families out of the 16 where the sales and operations planning process is adding some value. In particular, I want to take a look at this one here, since it's the largest. And you can see that each of the individual products in there is adding value, and in particular, 104 is adding the most. So again, let's go and take a look at this item and see why this one is doing so well. And there we have it. This is product 104. And you can see that the history, while it looks like it has some seasonality and it's given some seasonal 12, it doesn't have a lot of seasonality showing up in the forecast. It doesn't have those same peaks. And if you take a closer look at those peaks, it's July here, it's August there. So they're not matching up year over year. This means that somebody is doing promotions differently in the year over year versus the previous. So they're actually spending some time maybe finding ways to move them to where they're more appropriate or doing slightly better ones, because this is a pretty large peak. And of course, our Rudy system can't understand that. It only looks for patterns in the history and it projects those forward. So your sales and operations planning process is going to do the best on items like this, where your promotions are not being repeated year over year, but are being done differently.
Do you happen to know what product 104 is, or are these like all confidential stuff that I shouldn't know?
They're all confidential stuff.
Okay, fair enough. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. Was just curious. If I was just curious if it was like, you know, specific types of products tend to follow, you know, just this promotional issue versus whatever. We'll move along. Okay.
Yeah, these are all of these. This whole portfolio is a very seasonal portfolio. So you will see a spring, a summer, and a fall promotional time period. And the reason we see so many of them go to December, go towards low numbers, is because they're being replaced by kind of holiday type products at that time of year. So they dip while the special version is out in the marketplace.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out if one of the things I always like to do when I look at models and forecasts is I always ask myself, does it make intuitive sense? But so that's why I was asking that, as I was curious if I could try to mentally see if it made sense. But yeah, I know that this stuff was confidential, so I didn't want to, you know, push that issue.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why this one has August big when, you know, July is usually, but yeah, I don't even know, but I think it's a good insight to see that they don't always repeat. And that's, I think, it for the dashboards, unless you have any questions on these right now.
No, this is a really good dashboard. I'm enjoying this.
Great.
I noticed you guys got 3 charts up there. Now, Rudy does like lots of different types of forecasts? You know, it does. I'm assuming it does a whole variety. And then how do you guys know the 3 best to show? Or does Rudy do the same 3 types of time series forecasting for everybody?
The three best are based on the mean absolute percent error here. So the past it has that holdout time period that's out of sample of six months. And it looks for which one has the best error in that time period.
I see. And so it's conceivable that product 104 gives me an auto-regressive, you know, and with two last terms and like 1 seasonal term, but a different product might have a different time series model as its best one, or is he going to have the same one for all 3 of these guys?
They'll be different. Mark, do you want to speak a little to this, especially about how it saves off the models?
Yeah, every model could be different. What it does is there's roughly between the combinations of models and seasonal periods, each product goes through about 65 different models. Then out of that 65 models, it calculates does the forecast, it does like a backstep process on a holdout sample to test for to generate test errors, forecast errors. Then it calculates the mean absolute percent error for all of those models, and then picks the best three and saves them. It saves the three best off in the CSV file.
Okay, so this is literally that. I guess I was not asking it well, but you've answered my question. My question was, I was trying to figure out if you were doing a brute force search of many different modeling types of time series, and then going from there taking the three best, and the answer is yes. I was just curious if you were doing 3 and then here they are, or 65 and here are the 3 best, and it's the second one. So,
yes.
Okay, I didn't answer I didn't ask my question with any degree of grace or aplomb, but you've figured out what I was asking and answered it. So nice job.
Okay.
Yeah, he did an excellent job in programming this, because it's extremely advanced, and it's doing everything it can to find the best models and putting them out there for the demand planner to choose from. So you know that the top 3 are really the top 3. It's excellent. And that's got a great lead into our results. So we'll take a look at those. So we already discussed how the Spacey Sprockets forecast has this forecast value add of $18.6 million. The statistical forecast alone, the Rudy system, can get us to $19.7 million, so a $1.1 million increase. And then the sales and operations planning forecast, as we discussed, wasn't really designed for the Rudy system. It was on the old way of doing things. And even though we looked at the incremental portion, it showed that it was really making things quite a bit worse at taking away $4 million in value. But we don't have to choose one or the other. We have that wonderful dashboard that helps us identify where we're getting value. So there was one family of products that we saw where the statistical forecast was not doing as well as the naive. So we can choose to use the naive forecast on that. And so that would be, in the recommended combination, the first one level would have the naive. Everything else, all the other 15, would be using the statistical forecast as the starting point. So that's $20 million there. We can add another $360,000 by using the sales and operations insights for those 4 families we looked at. So we can get a final value of $20,500,000, which is a $1.9 million increase over the original Spacely Sprocket forecast. So of course our recommendation is to deploy this. Rudy is doing great, but it's not just the accuracy or the value that's adding. It's going to be so much more efficient. You don't have people taking data out and adding it back in and doing all those other things. And with these dashboards, you can really have people focus on what's important. You can find which of the groupings the sales and operations planning group is really having an effect on, and have them focus on making that better instead of trying to touch everything. So it's going to add a lot of value and make everything much more efficient. But as we've done these explorations, as we just were looking at, we found some other opportunity areas. While we said that, $2 million almost of benefit, there's still about $15 million of inventory costs that would be still sitting out there. And we, obviously have one of the best demand forecasting systems in Rudy. So it's very advanced. It's doing all sorts of amazing different methods. And it's still not getting you all the way through to fix all that demand, all that inventory cost. So the recommendation is to take a look at the rest of the inventory processes. We assumed that everything else was optimal already, but if you don't have optimal safety stock levels or don't have good lead times or things like that, then obviously those are also having an impact on the inventory situation. The other thing we talked about quite a bit is trade promotions. If you're doing the same thing in the past every year, maybe that's a sign that you're not really changing things up and finding the most optimal promotions if you're just repeating them. So that's another recommendation. Trade promotion optimization tools are out there. They're not that expensive. They're not that hard to put in place, and they could help understand the return on investment. since about 25% of revenue is spent on trade promotions and CPG space, it makes a lot of sense to invest in this type of product so that we would get more value out of sales and operations because there would be more things changing each year. And now we're going to go ahead and talk about the future recommendations, and Sally's going to cover that.
Okay, so for phase 2 of this project, we recommend further enhancements to the Rudy system, including the improved outlier correction analysis and improved reclustering of the planner assigned groups. And we also have a goal of building an app for Spacely's with access to all the forecasts. And at this point, I will demonstrate the app, or the prototype of the app. So I'm going to share my screen. Can people see my phone?
I see your phone, and you've already answered my first question. You found out who Tralfaz is.
Oh, there's more to come, Don.
Okay.
Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a simplified version of a report and a dashboard that would be good for demand planners or warehouse people to look at without going through the Tableau dashboards. I built a very easy dashboard to look up the forecasts. So here you can search by item and month, and just a simple bar chart for the 6-month forecast with the corresponding numbers for the quantity, sales, costs, and net revenue. And it's interactive. You can change the product. And then that has changed, everything's changed. You can highlight a month and the numbers will change. So this is just a real quick way to look up the forecast. And this is using the, at this point, this is using the first model with the lowest MAPE in those forecasts. And of course, as it is implemented at Spacely's, you can, update this to include whichever model is being used in those appropriate forecasts. So this is the Power BI report. Now I'm using Power Apps for the apps, which is also a Microsoft product. And the nice thing about these Microsoft tools is they communicate. Microsoft has a really good reputation for integrating their technologies and making them communicate and easy to work with. So you can kind of streamline the process without introducing, foreign tools that require more coding to get them to communicate and work together. So like that dashboard is connected to my Excel spreadsheet. If I change something in the spreadsheet, it will change to the Power BI automatically, and then it will also show up in the Microsoft Power app. So here we have the app that we built for you. Now this is an internal app, basically just for your employees. It's a closed system. Microsoft has a lot of security measures built into these products where you have to share them with your employees. Your employees have to have the corporate email address. Since you're reporting on internal confidential numbers, it's a good thing. But we also try to make it fun, because in this day and age with social media and the millennials, it's nice to have a little fun in your workplace. So here's just a little history of Spacely's. And we can add sound bites to make it fun for you.
I love it.
That's his car. That's George Jetson's car.
I know what that sound is.
Okay, so here, this forecast button is the Power BI tile. This is a simplified version. It is interactive in that this is the total forecast for the 6 months for all the products. And it's interactive in that I can touch on it. I can touch the bars and it'll give you a number. Microsoft is integrating it so that if you touch on the report or touch on the dashboard, it can link you to the report by asking for access. From what I've read about Microsoft Power BI and Power Apps, that's in the works right now. In fact, I think it was supposed to be done in August, which it's not, I think August of 2017. So it's not quite up and working unless you have web developer skills and you can get back behind the scenes of how it's making the connection. Then you can do quite a bit of programming, which I tried to figure out, which was a little bit above and beyond what I could do, but that can be done. So this is more of the fun stuff.
There's Mr. Spacely.
Well, and you have to have Miss Rivets, and she's never missed a day at work.
Okay. I did not know his secretary was Miss Rivets.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, things you learn in the capstone project.
I was going to say.
Okay, and so then we have the employee of the month, our good old George.
Okay.
He's been the employee of the month, and now he's got his work cut out for him because he's going to have to go from pushing one button to pushing a different button to get the new forecasting system to work. Hopefully he'll be able to handle that. But his job is Rudy, so he should be able to do it. And then, of course, you know, everybody likes their pets, and everybody wants to see the dog of the month. So this will keep people interactive and busy, you know, just a fun thing to do at work. And up here we have Astro.
Ruh-roh.
Now, Astro has a little bit of a fun history because he was the dog of the fabulously wealthy Mr. J.P. Got Rockets, and his name used to be Tralfaz.
Tralfaz? Tralfaz will have the very best. A split-level doghouse, heated doggy pool, 7-course doggy meals 3 times a day, his own fur-lined fire hydrant. He will live in the lap of luxury.
I think you have too much free time.
Okay, so then I added one more thing, and this is just for you, Don.
Okay, video of the day.
So you can add all your little cartoon clips.
Uh-oh, it got stuck. Yeah, the dean is going to wonder what the heck we're up to in this class now.
Hey, you wanted us to build an app, and I wanted to put all the bells and whistles in.
You sure did. I love it.
So that is the app. Do you have any questions?
I do not have questions. I can give you comments when are you guys finished with your presentation then?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I want to just say, fantastic job. This was an outstanding presentation. I'll tell you, if you go to the top again with your slides, we'll kind of just run through them real fast. But overall, I just want to say before we get started, this is outstanding. Normally, I'm never a big fan of any project involving time series analysis. I always, just it's never my cup of tea. But this was really outstanding because what you guys did was you actually used time series analysis in a very practical, real world capacity. Most people are like trying to predict like 3 things simultaneous, or, three time series, and I'm like, that's not really doing it. This is when time series is done in the real world, this is what it's usually for. Inventory, and there's like thousands of things that have to be done, and you're got to try to forecast snow shovels and Twinkies and kiddie pools, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when time series is actually practical, and you guys used it for this. I know this is real world data. Showing this to the people who own the data, and did you get any thoughts from them, or is this strictly just on your own?
I haven't shown it to them yet.
Do you intend to? Because they might be really impressed with this.
Yes, I do, because one of my battles for a long time is to convince them that inventory is not the only, is not only because of the forecast, that there's probably other things they need to work on. So it's good to have that proven out.
Well, it's outstanding. I'd love to find out after the fact, how it is received. I love it when a real world data set is used by students, because I'm just curious, how it's received. And then, if it turns out like you show this to whomever owns this data, 6 months from now, and if they hate it, let me know so I can go back and change your grades and lower them. Okay. That's a joke. Okay.
Yes, it's funny.
Everybody's on mute here, I guess. Okay. So anyways, normally I'm not a big fan of this, but this is a great application of time series of a real world situation. I love the slide deck. It's not, again, I'm always a fan of a simple slide deck because it's, when they're too busy, then nobody pays attention. So this is simple and entertaining, but it's not too simple. In other words, you're actually conveying knowledge. I love the next slide here, the one with the people right here. I'm always a fan of, I've been into thousands of meetings in my career, and I'll tell you something. Death by PowerPoint is what people say in corporate America. And when somebody puts a little bit of lighthearted humor, it keeps people from dying of boredom. The thing is, you never want it to be too silly, and you never want it to be too serious, and you really hit the nice balance here. This is cute, and if you do stuff like this in your career, people will pay attention to your talks. So I just, little things like this give you a chuckle, and it's nice. So do that. Also, you had the situation later on where you couldn't find the right slide. You handled that very, very well. That's what's going to happen in the real world is, your slide deck will get screwed up. Something bad will happen. You just made a small joke and you fixed the problem. No big deal. I'll tell you, the worst thing is when people have a problem like that and they totally are like, I'm sorry. You just panic. It just, the rest of your talk is derailed because everybody's like feeling uncomfortable. So when those bad things happen, handle it exactly the way you did. Make a little joke and move along, and that's how I just wanted to made a little note to that. But let's keep moving on the slide deck here. So the next thing, I love this analogy. You've explained what's going on, how they're doing it today, and the only thing I would say is I like the little guys digging with their shovels, but that probably should have been its own slide and made bigger because it's hard to read it. Because it's such a powerful little video image as to what they're doing. When you show what they're doing, you're like, wow, this is not a good way to be doing for. Yeah, see, making that bigger and making its own slide, or leaving it small and then highlighting it on the next slide big, might, little things like that can make a very powerful point. But I'm not criticizing. I'm just giving you a suggestion is when you get a really cool image like that, really be sure to highlight it. Let's go to the next one here. So again, I like this a lot because you really underscore the importance of why the forecasting is critical. You got too many snow shovels sitting in the back room. You got a crate of those things. They're eating up space and money. But then at the same time, if you don't have enough snow shovels later on, you got a problem. So you really explained to me very nicely why we're doing this. And then going to the next slide here. So right here, I like this. You guys really made a nice case as to why you're using the R routines. I got no problem with the open source stuff because guess what? In the real world, free is a hard price point to beat. And you guys are now saying, look, we can do this completely open source, off the shelf. And by the way, if we really need to expand it, we can, buy the there's, what is it, like a server version of it, or what is it that you can buy if it's if the open source isn't enough?
There's a professional version and a server version that both require yearly contracts.
Right, but the point is, you're saying, look, you can start off doing it totally free, and then you can buy this professional version, which is nice. That's a great way to do it in the real world, because the boss, if it doesn't work on the free version, he's not going to want to write a check for the expensive version. So that's a great way to do this. So I mean, I like the grade card here. Of course, as a former SAS employee, I was hoping SAS would win, but I understand your rationale for choosing Rudy and R, and you know what, makes perfect sense in this case. Let's move on to the next one.
We didn't try the Forecast server and all the really, all we had was the Forecast Studio.
Hey, no, it's still free. Is a tough price point to beat. Hey, I know the reference here. That's HAL 9000, isn't it?
That's HAL.
You guys are going to have to get up pretty early in the morning to fool me on these cultural references from the 70s. Okay, let's move along. I like the explanation of Rudy. Here's one thing. I made a note. Who was doing the talk on Rudy?
I did, Mark.
Mark, okay. One thing, Mark, not criticism, but one of the things you might want to do is, I can tell you were reading from a script when you were explaining Rudy. It's better to do something more conversational. Just talk to it. It doesn't have to be perfect. People prefer talking, conversational explanations to reading. Just a thought there. It's not meant to be bad criticism. Just a recommendation.
Okay.
Unless you weren't reading, in which case I feel really stupid. So, anyways, let's see. Go to the next. But other than that, your explanation was perfect. It was really spot on, and you really explained it well. So I like that. Hey, love the Scotty reference again. You're gonna have to get up early in the morning for me not to know it, and it's nice when you do things, little touches like that. They're nice. I also like the next slide as well, when you were saying, look, this thing, the professional version is fault tolerant. That's big, especially, stuff like this. It's going to need to be reliable, and you've given us a tool here that can handle, you don't want a tool if it's not going to be reliable, and you've given something that can give the forecast, and if something goes wrong, it still works. So I like all of the reasons for doing the tool here. So let's move on, and then let's keep going. I think this is when you got into the dashboard, right?
Correct.
So we don't have to go into the dashboard right now. However, this was a great dashboard. Normally, I have to twist students' arms to do a dashboard because it's not really relevant to the product or to the project, but I think it's an important thing for them to do because that's real world. So I have to say, come on, do a dashboard for me because it's good. This is a project where dashboard was critical to the success of the project, and you guys did a great dashboard. I mean, you showed the 3 top models. You allowed the guy to click on the buttons and look at it. It was a simple dashboard. It made perfect sense to me to look at it. It's intuitively obvious. This was a great dashboard. So, that's sort of a role model for what a dashboard should be. Simple and yet very intuitively obvious, so easy that the CEO can use it without even getting instructions. And at the same time, it's simple but yet very, very useful to me. So hats off or tip of the hat to the great dashboard that you guys did there. And then I like what you did next, which is, oh, and also one other thing, you don't have to go back, but one of the other things is I like how you also acknowledge that sometimes the naive model where you say, hey, look, what we did last week is what we're going to do this week. The naive model is what everybody uses in the real world because you just don't have time or the capacity many times to do more complicated time series forecasts. So people just say, well, I sold 10 Twinkies yesterday. I'm going to sell 10 Twinkies tomorrow. That's what they use. And the fact is, you guys even acknowledge that sometimes that's just the way to go. So you guys were able to build sophisticated time series models, but at the same time, you were able to acknowledge that sometimes the naive stuff was better, and you're able to go back and forth when one of them is outperforming the other. And then I like this right here, because you're throwing a dollar amount at me. It's kind of hard for me not to say, oh, geez, your forecast is $20 million, and I can improve that by, 1.9, we'll call that 2 million. That's a 10% increase. This is not, you threw real hard numbers at me, and that's important to do when you're doing a presentation like this. This would be hard for a CEO to hand wave this away or stiff arm you. This is something that's very real numbers. So throwing a dollar amount at a project is always a great thing. Let's see. On a little bit more. So you guys went on to the cell phone app next. Now, what I really like was I kind of, pressured you a little bit, and I said, guys, I would love a cell phone app from you. And I like what you did. You guys said, look, Don, we don't have time for that. And you know what? Sometimes you got to tell the boss no. And you can't just roll over and play dead when it's not feasible. And you guys didn't have the time to do that. Okay. So, you handled it with professionalism. You said that's the next phase, and you put that in your report, next phase, et cetera, et cetera. And I was okay with it, and that's a great skill to have. But what I'm really surprised with is all of a sudden your oil report, and you've got a prototype of one. So already you told me no, and then you give me one anyway. That makes me as a boss very happy. So showing that kind of initiative and stick-to-itiveness and positive can-do spirit is always a great thing to have in your career. So that's great that you did. And again, I love the cell phone app had the touch of humor. And I know that those little features, like you said, look, the millennials are going to want to be entertained. And you're right. If you give them something like that, they're going to probably go in there and say, gee, let's see the video clip of the day. Oh, and while I'm at it, let's look at the forecast. That's the kind of thing that, draws them into using the app. So that's a nice thing. It was humorous, and probably, the dean's probably wondering what the heck we're doing, but I still appreciated all of the humorous touches in there. So overall, an outstanding project. I love that you guys, again, were using analytics to solve a problem. It was, it wasn't an end in itself. It was, you're trying to make me money, and you succeeded in doing that. So this was an outstanding project, an outstanding presentation as well. So here, I'm going to stop recording right now, and I'll let you guys ask me questions.